March 31st, 1922. Hinterkaifeck, Bavaria. The sun sets just after 6:30. The temperature drops immediately, the way it does in the Bavarian countryside in early spring when the ground has not yet decided to thaw. Inside the farmhouse, a fire has been lit. The smell of wood smoke settles over the property. The animals in the barn have been fed. The doors have been checked, the way they are checked every evening without variation, because this is a farm and the routine of a farm does not change from one day to the next. The 6 people inside this house have no particular reason to believe tonight will be different from any other. They are wrong about that. Someone else is already on the property. This is the story of 6 people murdered on an isolated Bavarian farm in 1922, a killer who remained in the house with their bodies for 3 days afterward, and an investigation spanning more than a century that has never produced a single arrest. The farmstead of Hinterkaifeck sits roughly 70 kilometers north of Munich, built around 1863. Its name comes from the nearby hamlet of Kaifeck, Hinter meaning behind in German, placing the farm precisely where its name suggests, behind Kaifeck, tucked against the edge of dense Bavarian forest on multiple sides. It is not a place strangers pass through. The road that reaches it serves no other destination. In the rural hill country of Bavaria in 1922, most of the surrounding population works in agriculture and knows their neighbours by name, by face, by the sound of their cart on the road. An unfamiliar person on the path to Hinterkaifeck would be noticed. An unfamiliar person who stayed would be noticed immediately, unless they came through the forest rather than the road, unless they never came into town at all. The farmhouses, 6 people. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, the patriarch, a man described by neighbours as crude, hot-tempered, difficult, feared by those who worked for him, despised by those who lived near him. He has worked this land for decades, and he is not a man who frightens easily or asks for help from anyone. His wife, Cecilia, 72, who inherited the farm as part of a divorce settlement from her first husband years before she married Andreas. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, who has lived at the farm since her husband, Karl, was reported killed fighting on the Western Front in December 1914, during the opening months of the First World War. His body was never recovered from the battlefield. Victoria has 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia, named for her grandmother, and 2-year-old Joseph. The dark history beneath the surface of this household is not incidental to what happens. It begins 6 months before the murders. The family's maid, Crescens Riga, abruptly quits. She tells people afterward that she left because of strange noises coming from the attic, and that she firmly believed the farmhouse was haunted. Andreas dismisses this. He is not a man who takes talk of haunting seriously. But other members of the family have also heard the sounds. Sounds too large to be a small animal, according to the accounts given to neighbours at the time. Andreas goes up into the attic multiple times with a lantern, searches the space, and finds nothing. No intruder, no evidence of one, no explanation. The sounds continue after each search, returning when he comes back down. Then, in March 1922, roughly 3 weeks before the murders, a Munich newspaper appears on the property. Andreas cannot account for it. He initially assumes the postman made an error. But nobody in the surrounding area subscribes to this specific paper. It simply appears. Around the same time, a key to the farmhouse goes missing. The family searches for it. It does not turn up. Then, just days before March 31st, Andreas finds something that should, by any reasonable measure, prompt a report to authorities. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading from the tree line at the edge of the forest, across the open ground of the farm, to a door with a broken lock opening into the machine room. Andreas follows the tracks from the tree line to the door. He searches the machine room, the barn, the house. He goes back up into the attic with his lantern. He finds nothing, but the tracks do not lead back out. Someone walked out of the Bavarian forest, entered the farm through a door with a broken lock, and by every physical trace left in the snow, never left. Andreas tells several neighbors about the tracks. He tells them about the newspaper and the missing key and the sounds in the attic. The neighbors listen. Nobody calls the police. Andreas does not call the police. He tells one neighbor that he is not afraid, that he has his rifle ready if needed. 8 years later, that neighbor repeats this in a formal witness statement. It is one of the last known records of anything Andreas Gruber said. What happens inside the farm on the evening of March 31st is reconstructed from physical evidence and autopsy findings because there are no surviving witnesses. Every person present that evening died before morning. The reconstruction that investigators eventually assemble suggests someone with intimate knowledge of farm routines and the specific geography of this property. The barn is where the livestock are kept. It is where unusual sounds at night would come from first. The place a farmer would walk toward to investigate without hesitation, without summoning help. Because investigating strange noises in the barn in the evening is simply what you do on a farm and has never required a second person. The killer uses this. Andreas enters the barn first. He is the patriarch, the one who would go first. The murder weapon is a mattock, a heavy agricultural tool used for breaking compacted ground and chopping through root systems. It is a tool that any farmer would know how to use and any farmer would recognize. The blow to Andreas's head is not the only blow. His face is caked with dried blood by the time investigators reach him. Then Cecilia, 72 years old, the grandmother.
You heard that too, didn't
Then
you?
Victoria.
Yes.
Victoria and her mother both show signs of strangulation in addition to blunt trauma. They may have been restrained before being killed, but it is Victoria who receives the worst of it. 9 separate strike wounds to the skull. The violence directed specifically at Victoria is disproportionate, even measured against the brutality of the rest of the scene. It speaks to something personal, something beyond efficiency. Then 7-year-old Cecilia walks into the barn. The child is struck, but she does not die immediately. She remained alive in the barn for several hours in the dark, among the bodies of her family, before finally dying. The evidence shows she pulled clumps of her own hair out during those hours. The killer then leaves the barn and enters the house. Maria Baumgartner, the maid, is in her room. She has been at this farm for only a matter of days. She barely knows the family. She has had no time to understand the history of this household. She is killed in her room with the same weapon. Then, 2-year-old Joseph, asleep in his crib, is killed with a single blow. 6 people, 1 evening, 1 weapon, and then the killer remains. The perpetrator does not flee into the forest, does not take the road north or south toward any town. Stays. Investigators later determined that whoever committed these murders continued living on the property for an estimated 3 days afterward. The livestock are found fed and tended when neighbors eventually arrive. Meals have been prepared and eaten in the kitchen. The fireplace has been used multiple times. A wall calendar in the house shows the date pages torn away through April 1st, as if someone continued marking each day passing inside a house full of bodies. The following night, an artisan named Michael Pluckel happens to pass by Hinterkaifeck on the road and observes smoke rising from the chimney, indicating the oven is being heated. An unidentified occupant of the house approaches Pluckel and directs a lantern directly into his eyes, blinding him, and Pluckel continues on his way without investigating further. He also notices that the smoke coming from the chimney carries a revolting smell. This report is taken down in statements years later. No examination of the oven is ever conducted to determine what was burned inside it. Outside in the surrounding village, daily life continues without interruption for 3 full days. The postman delivers letters. Villagers passing on the distant road observe smoke from the chimney. The farm appears, from every observable point, to be functioning exactly as it always has. By April 4th, the silence has stretched long enough to become conspicuous. Victoria, who sings in the church choir, has not appeared at services. The mail has been piling up uncollected. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbour, the man who had a relationship with Victoria, the man whose name is on Josef's birth certificate, grows concerned. Earlier that same day, he sent his 16-year-old son, Johann, and his 9-year-old stepson to the farm to check boys' return without having seen anyone. Schlittenbauer then goes himself, bringing neighbours Michael Pohl and Jakob Sigel. The 3 men arrive and find every door locked. They break through a gate to enter the barn. Inside, they find 4 bodies stacked in the straw, partially covered in hay. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia. Schlittenbauer, without waiting for the others, apparently produces a key and unlocks the front door of the house alone. He enters by himself. He finds the maid Maria Baumgartner dead in her room, and 2-year-old Joseph dead in his bassinet. When asked later why he entered the house alone when the murderer might still have been present, he says he went to look for Joseph. He is also observed moving the bodies in the barn before investigators arrive. Word spreads through the village. By the time lead investigator Georg Reingruber arrives from Munich, 45 miles away, dozens of local residents have walked through the farmhouse. Footprints in the snow, which might have been the single most important piece of physical evidence in the entire case, are churned beyond recovery by the boots of people who do not understand what they are destroying. Court physician Johann Baptist Aumüller performs autopsies on April 5th in the barn itself, among the bodies. He confirms the mattock as the murder weapon and establishes that the killer used both the blunt edge and the sharp blade at different points. The suspects that investigators develop over the following years fall into several categories, each with its own internal logic and its own unresolvable
Still marking
gap.
time.
Lorenz Schlittenbauer remains the most prominent. He had motive, the bitter end of his relationship with Victoria, the disputed paternity of Josef, the court proceedings in which Victoria attempted to compel him to pay child support, his behavior at the scene, the calm, the deliberate movement of bodies, the solo entry into the house, the specific words he chose. He eventually sues multiple neighbors for slander over accusations of his involvement and wins those suits. He dies in 1941, having maintained his innocence for nearly 2 decades. Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, officially killed in action in France in December 1914, his body was never recovered. After the Second World War, prisoners of war from the Schrobenhausen region being sent home by a German-speaking Soviet officer who claimed, in conversation, to be the Hinterkaifeck murderer. Some of these men later revised their statements, weakening their credibility. The theory that a man believed dead for 8 years returned from the war and killed his entire family before disappearing again is dramatic and unresolved, and cannot be either confirmed or dismissed. In 2007, German Police Academy students conduct a formal cold case analysis of the Hinterkaifeck murders. They announce that they have identified a likely suspect. They decline to release the name, citing the existence of living descendants. That name has never been made public. In the bizarre postscript that 1922 forensic methodology sometimes produced, the victims' heads are removed from their bodies after autopsy and sent to Munich, where they are examined by clairvoyance rather than by additional forensic specialists. The skulls are subsequently lost. and not located in the institutional chaos that followed the Second World War. The 6 victims are buried in the local cemetery without their heads. Less than a year after the murders, the farmhouse is demolished. The demolition uncovers additional evidence that active investigation had missed. A mattock covered in dried blood hidden in the attic, separate from the one found in the barn loft, and a penknife in the hay. In May 1927, 5 years after the murders, a stranger stops a resident of Weidhofen on the road at midnight. The stranger asks questions about the Hinterkaifeck murders. Then, without warning, he loudly announces that he is the murderer before running into the forest. He is never identified. He is never seen again. Over 100 people are interviewed by investigators across the decades of inquiry that follow. No conviction is ever secured. No charge is ever formally brought. The case remains open. A small concrete memorial now stands close to where the farmhouse once stood. The farmstead itself is gone. The forest is still there, on multiple sides, exactly where it always was. And somewhere at the edge of that forest, in the weeks before March 31st of 1922, a set of footprints began, cut into the snow in one direction only, moving out of the trees and across the open ground toward a lit window in a farmhouse where 6 people were going about their evening and had no particular reason to believe the night would end differently than any other. The snow filled in behind whoever made them. The forest took back the path. Nothing came out.